Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today we're joined by Brian and Sean, the hosts of the Mythinformed podcast. Sean is also the president and co-founder. Brian is a board member and chair of finance and outreach. They're having an event coming up on the 16th in Milwaukee. There's still time to purchase tickets for that. They'll be having speakers discussing topics such as populism, race relations, immigration, and more. Unlike other guests that claim to want to hold conversations with the opposition, and yet they only have people on their platform that already agree with them, these guys legitimately do have conversations with people all over the place. I think they're doing great work. We have a fun conversation surrounding the difficulty in having controversial conversations, how people insulate themselves in their bubbles, their experience hosting such events, and more. It was a fantastic conversation all around, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to have them on our podcast. Without further ado, we hope you enjoy the podcast.
Shut up and sit down.
Yeah, so I think that's a good way to start off the conversation, that there seems to be a strange shift in the cultural zeitgeist in which these types of conversations are being had. And so people like James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian are trying to tackle this conversation by attacking what seems to be the root of the problem, which is critical theory, or critical method specifically. So the first question that I sort of want to ask you is, generally speaking, when you guys started up this company that you have, or when you sort of joined the conversation against these sorts of bad ideas, has the way that the conversations have been being had gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Do you guys think that maybe in the future, 10 years down the line, we're not going to have the problems that we're seeing now?
Man, it's hard to predict
That's
the
a
future.
really good question.
Right, yeah.
They're definitely harder. There's more third rails and there's more landmines than there used to be, even rolling back like 3 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I would also say the discourse is shifting, especially due to the pandemic. You know, more people are talking online. I mean, you know, if you look at the social media users, they've just shot up since the pandemic has been going on. And what's happened over time, like when we started in 2013. Social media was around, but it wasn't like where everyone was living on it. Like it was picking up, so it wasn't as popular. But over time, I'd say over the last 5 years, more and more people have been using it, and the discourse online is just getting worse and worse because of these echo chambers have been created, and you know all of these narratives are coming out, and people really, they're not necessarily even talking to each other anymore online. They're just talking past one another, trying to get gotcha points, or trying to, you know, one up people. Yeah, dunking on people. And so to answer your question, I think it's gotten worse, and that's kind of why we think the live space is so important.
Mm-hmm. When did you sort of start to notice the problem in the way that conversation's being had? So one of the things that I always talk about is that I started to recognize the problem when I was a junior in high school. I'm going to age myself now. So back in 2014, this is when I sort of, you know, as a sort of edgy teenager, I was really getting into the whole new atheist movement. Mm-hmm. And this is when I started to realize that there seemed to be a heavy load of sort of social justice ideology in the new atheist community. And as I was getting older, and I started it was when I entered the university system that I realized just how much this has pestilentially spread within academia. Mm-hmm. And that's when I realized that it wasn't just so much as me being a person of color and had a particular set of viewpoints. I had to be politically a person of color. Mm-hmm. And this idea that I had heterodox views or went against the social justice narrative was a matter of me having internalized depression. And so this is when I really started to see just how bad it was. But that was, and again, this was just a matter of me getting into the new atheist movement and then getting into the university system. I was pretty young, so for all I know, this could have been a problem way back when. So when did you guys first start to notice this problem?
I mean, for me personally, I probably was a little bit late on it. I mean, I noticed it was a blip on my radar when the Missouri thing happened in 2015, when that campus kind of went down, but it didn't register until say late 2016 when during the Trump election and the run up, and especially in 2017, you get the triple whammy of that the college explosion. So the one in Vermont where Dr. Sanger and Charles Murray went to, and then they get attacked.
Yeah.
That's the name of the college. I'll know it if I hear it. Then Berkeley with Milo kind of burned, and then on its heels was Evergreen State. And Evergreen State was so shocking and just so completely outrageous that I thought this takes the cake. And that you couldn't not look away from Evergreen.
Yeah, and when you talk about the new atheist movement specifically, so we entered that realm in 2013. It was kind of like how we started the organization. We wanted to have topics, I'm sure similar to yourself, topics discussing religion and atheism and all that stuff. So that was our main focus in the beginning. And we started in, so like 2013, it was pretty normal. 2014 is pretty normal. Like Brian said, right around 2015, we started seeing more topics at the atheist conferences. Our mission was to like go to these conferences and meet the people and see kind of what the topics are, so we can take that information and build our own. And we started seeing more of the social justice topics being talked about more than religion.
Yeah.
Like we started seeing, like different social justice aspects being panel discussions versus the new atheist stuff. So it wasn't until 2017 when we hosted MythCon 4 that we really kind of came head with this crowd. But I would say people like Sargon, Armored Skeptic, Shuan Head, these people were covering this for years, and they were talking about feminism and then
Chris Reagan.
Yeah, there's a whole host of people. And it was like, for us, it was like interesting, but then we started seeing like how it was just taking over the atheist space, to where if you don't agree with these concepts, you're shunned, essentially. So
Brian, Sean, I only recently found out about your channel and the events you guys have been putting on for the last couple of years. In preparation for today's episode, I was reviewing some of your past podcasts, and I was actually floored when I was listening to one in which you guys were describing the event that you guys put on, I think, last year. I think it was Minds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and can you guys summarize a little bit for us, like what happened during that event and its aftermath? I think that was the one where you guys invited Melissa Chen. I think I'm not sure if Sargon was there, but I think Daryl Davis was at that event, and he, an individual who taught over 200 members of the KKK to leave that organization, he of all people was called a white supremacist, which I thought was absolutely insane.
Yeah. So like, in quick, what happened, like we scheduled a piece out in New Jersey. So instead of doing it in Milwaukee, we were going to have our conference in New Jersey.
Yeah,
we picked a small kind of sleepy town called Pittman.
Yeah, I'll back up even further. So we were doing the MythCons, and the MythCon 4 happened and all that craziness, and then MythCon 5 was in Milwaukee. We started talking with Tim Pool and Bill Ottman from Minds, and they were interested in doing an event as well. And Tim wanted to do something near kind of where he lived. So we picked New Jersey. And the idea was the same as the MythCon thing. It was to bring a bunch of different people with varying viewpoints together to talk about various topics. Pretty vanilla, pretty much the same stuff we've been doing. And it was fine, like we were, it was probably like 4 months in, no problems, no issues. We had our venue and all that, and everything was good. Everything was greenlit. And then I'd say it's like right about a month before the event, a couple Antifa groups caught wind of it, and then they started getting the word out, and then they harassed our venue to the point where they canceled the original venue in Jersey, canceled on us. They threatened to burn down their theater, and they also hijacked their Twitter account and changed like all the info in it. So this is a white supremacist Twitter account. This is for the venue. Their Twitter account has been hijacked. It's a white supremacist account. We're not going to give this up. We're not going to release this account until you cancel this event. So like crazy shit was going on. And then from there, Brian, you can take it from there. I just want to.
Well, no, that's correct. So we knew that it was Antifa because they had posted a list of the people that they thought had scarlet letters, right? That the people that, you know, some were okay. So some, like a lot of our people on the left didn't get flagged, but those on the right that did, and it was put up on IDAVox. So that's the Antifa, at least one Antifa outlet. And they were saying, here's the list of sins that they've committed, therefore they need to be deplatformed. And they were encouraging their followers to call the theater, email the theater, do whatever you want, show up in person, that kind of thing. So their voicemail quickly overflows. They're getting tons of emails. They don't know what to do. We talk them.
They lost
we talk
their
to
Twitter
them.
account.
Yeah, we talk to them. We get it handled. Like, oh, that most at first the theater was kind of mad that they felt they're innocent victims in this because this is just a political dispute. The same theater had hosted Ann Coulter to speak the year before, who was provocative personality. They held on to that and they said, okay, well, we hosted Ann Coulter. We understand politics, but it was so bad and venomous enough to where not only did they get the theater to change, but they got them to actually believe their message.
Yeah.
So the manager of the theater said that we were white nationalists and spreading hate. So this is like it actually convinced him. And what they did was they hacked that Twitter account, changed the name, and held it hostage. And so this Twitter account will be released when you cancel the Minds IRL New Jersey event on August 30th of this year. And that's blackmail that they gave into. Now, at the same time, the after party, which was at a small venue a few doors down called Human Brewing, which is essentially a bar, they were under the same pressure to cancel the after party, but they didn't. So they were a Jewish, two Jewish people who are very liberal, progressive. They have humans on their instead of men and women in the bathroom, it says humans. These are not in any way like, you know, like hardcore right-wing people, but out of principle, they said, this is wrong. We'll keep you. But it didn't stop that they wouldn't deplatform them. They continued to get calls after calls, emails. They spammed their Yelp.
Yeah.
So their Yelp went from like 4.3 stars to 1.9.
Yeah.
I mean, that hurts business.
Yelp actually released a statement saying we are going to erase all of these phony messages and their account is actually protected. So Yelp actually did the right thing.
Yeah, Yelp did the right thing after a while.
I give them credit for that.
Yeah, because eventually we were encouraging people that come to the event to please give them some stars, you know, so then there were stars going both ways. So eventually Yelp did do that, but this is outrageous. So you have this event. So the after party is a known place. So when the theater canceled on us, that was 12 days prior to the event.
Yeah.
Out of state. So imagine trying to get meanwhile, this has made local news and is making quite a bit of buzz online.
And it also made headline news in Philly.
Yeah.
Which is we were in Jersey and right across the bridge is Philly. So there was actually a couple of venues after we lost our venue because they
have to find a new venue.
Yeah, I had to travel out there. I was working with Tim out there, and we had like literally 12 days, like Brian says, and we had to find a new venue. So Bill, Tim, and I were working and trying to go to these different places. But there were some venues we walked in, we're like, hey, we want to do this thing, and they had the newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and they're like, is this you guys? And we're like, yes, and they're like, no thanks. So like, like it went everywhere. And long story short, we ended up working with the casino out in Philly, which was fantastic. They did a great job. They were unbelievable, and
they were amazing.
No problems, no issues, no violence, no protesters at the casino.
Remember, but the after party still is at the same venue, which is a known venue. So the other thing we did was we wouldn't tell people right away that we said we have secured a new venue, but it will be released the day of, because what we didn't want was Antifa to have 12 days to then pound on a casino.
Yeah. So
we figured if we do it the morning of, they won't have time to organize.
Yeah.
And that proved to be a nice little security tactic, but didn't matter. The after party was still known. So there were protesters there. They were waiting, and because they had freaked the local police out enough, the local police were out in force and basically kept them separated. They put all kinds of like these lights, these kind of weird fluorescent lights to kind of light the place up, which and put roadblocks in this sleepy town. So it's eerie. And then you have Antifa on one side of the street, and then they kind of let our people come into the venue through the back. So there wasn't any, keep them separated kind of thing. But it was still crazy listening to the chanting and calling, our black attendees racial slurs, women
They did call Daryl
misogynistic
Davis,
slurs, and they called him
Daryl
white
Davis a white
supremacist
supremacist,
and the first black member of the Klan.
Yeah.
It's just
Cool.
chaos.
Well, you know what they did to the people who owned the place for the after party. I mean, that's proof of cancel culture right then and there. And people still say, like, AOC of all people says it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. That's absolutely ridiculous.
I know.
No.
Yeah, but
And that was very emotional for them. If you
Yeah.
listen to what they're talking about, they're all they did was sign a small business contract, and now they're under fire for no fault of their own, other than participating in a normal business contract that everybody does.
Yeah.
It was very unfair to them, and like they said, like they lost some sleep, as we did too, and it sucks, especially your first time in it. You're like, what's going on? Because there's so much that's going on. You're getting contacted all the time, so it appears to be more people than it really is.
Well, going back to these events, what's the reception been like for the ones you've held so far? Like, you know, I'm really interested in asking if you guys know anything about the, you know, again, the overall size, but also about the political makeup of your guests. You know, one of the other events I occasionally tune into are the monk debates. I saw some events on there, like the ones they had with Christopher Hitchens, with Jordan Peterson, and I know they have some kind of system in which they poll their audience as to their views as to how many, how much of the audience is for or against a particular point that's about to be argued.
Sure. Yeah.
And they show that before and after the event. Do you guys do any kind of have any kind of similar measurement of metrics in that for your events themselves, or?
Yeah, we don't share them publicly, but yeah, we do surveys. You know, the surveys are pretty, like, we'll ask the question of, like, you know, which way do you lean, you know, politically, what your favorite panel was, you know, if your positions moved, if any.
But our measurement for it was this. So we told people to say, where are you on X question?
Yeah.
Like 1 meaning extremely against, 10 meaning extremely for. And we asked people to rate give us a number, and then give us a number afterwards.
Yeah.
And then, so if you move from a 5 to a 6 or a 6 to a 3, we could track that, and you could run averages on that. Yeah. So that's generally how we did it.
And as far as our makeup goes,
but that was all after the event. We didn't do it at the event. So this was all through surveys retroactive.
Yeah, after the event. And as far as our makeup, we get it's like 30% conservative / libertarian. We had, like, what was it last year? It was like 15% centrist. There's like 8% progressive. Brian, remind me.
Yeah, so we have a reasonable bell curve. It's like it leans a little to the right, so the mode is kind of center right libertarian.
Yeah,
but you know, it does have like 15% progressives.
That's right.
You know, and about 15% conservatives.
Yeah,
it's just that, you know, the bell curve isn't perfect on the center.
Yeah, so a good range,
but it's a decent range.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really interested in seeing how these dialogues really how much they actually play a role in shifting people's perspectives, and just how effective they are at the very least at just planting the seed of new ideas.
Yeah.
One of the reasons.
I'll give you an example there. Yeah. So we've actually had many speakers, attendees. We hear it all the time. You know, I moved my position on this, but it's interesting too, watching, like, speakers that have hardline positions that will move. We had a couple progressive speakers last year that, you know, on stage said, "Hey, I didn't know that. I learned something new. You know, it changes the way I think about X topic." And we've had it on the opposite side too. People, conservatives, that have done the same thing, and they've actually told us several times. They're like, you know, it was really good we had this conversation because this is what I learned, and they are able to change their stance. You know, they do evolve, or they do move their position. So
or found different points of agreement that they didn't think they had.
Yeah, exactly.
So to make them, you know, instead of being, I'm completely opposed to you, saying we're opposed on a lot of things, but we share XYZ common values.
One of the reasons I asked that question is because, like, I'm really, there's a question out there, at least for me right now, is like how much hunger there actually is for this kind of intellectual discourse. And a couple of years back when we had Penguin Philosophy in the picture, and they started the house events, starting with the one they had with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, which sold out. I was sure that there were more people were more interested in discussing the fine slices of all kinds of issues we have in our society, rather than just hewing to whatever Fox News or CNN is willing to tell them. But as I think we all know, that organization was just so badly mismanaged that it had to fold right before that event they had in New York, which had an entire smorgasbord of controversial topics up for discussion, and it looked like there's going to be a huge turnout before it bombed. Now, I was really encouraged by the event before it crashed, because it looked like people really wanted to dive in to the issues rather than just follow along at whatever narrative they hew to. But fast forward to 2020, and what do we see? We see people chanting slogans. We see people diving into conspiracy theories. We see a lot of binary thinking, and especially with these quote unquote social justice movements, and just throwing out the very, very general idea: if you're not with us, you're against us, you're a white supremacist, you're a racist, whatever. Now, you see a lot of sloganeering, especially out of the Black Lives Matter crowd, and I don't know whether to understand this phenomena in 2020 is to whether or not we as a people have taken a step backwards, with people now more willing to be driven by some kind of emotional narrative, or do we in fact not take a step back, but where we always are, as we are, just a very, very tribal people who just want to follow to hew to our particular stories. Because humans are pack animals, no matter how we put it. Like, what's your take on this? Have we evolved? Have we stayed stagnant? Have we taken a step back? Where are we?
We're more aware of things we probably shouldn't be. Like, all of your friends, especially you probably know the politics of your closest friends. What about like the circles that are farther out? I just knew these people as, they're a lot of fun. We never talked politics. I didn't know what their politics were. You know everybody's politics now. I mean, everybody knows. And I think you can't tribalize things that you don't know.
Yeah.
So that's one part of it.
Yeah, and what I would say is, going back to your statement on Pangborn, that's something we were aware of only because we're in the industry, and it's always frustrating for us when another event organizer is not able to follow through on what they say they're going to do, because it gives the whole industry a bad name. Yeah. And we've seen this time and time again. It wasn't just him, but the luxury he had was the IDW speakers. He had the Sam Harris, he had the Weinstein brothers, he had the Jordan Petersons, and that's the interesting thing. So for us, our goal is to bring in viewpoint diversity. Now, you can say the IDW have viewpoint diversity, but they really don't. They may disagree on things amongst each other, but they're pretty much the same brand. What we're bringing is like what I like to call them, like the blue collar intellectuals, because the IDW like is up here, that's where they think they are. And what we're bringing is people, that like have done it and made it on their own type of, like have their own channels, have their own media, and have them discuss. And we're bringing people that disagree wildly and have wildly different views to have the discussion. So would it be great if the IDW came to our events? Of course, but it's almost like one of those things where it's taboo because our people are deemed as, we can't talk to those people, so you do see cancel culture happen in different ways, and like based on what I've seen, like there's some people that other people just don't want to talk to because they think it's like the guilt by
association. We have to get over that talking to person X will quote unquote ruin my brand.
Right.
I mean, that has got to, because what's going to stain you?
We don't subscribe.
Right. I mean, if everyone's wearing their croquet white, and like one person's a tiny bit dirty with the grass stain.
Yeah.
Okay, well now they're out.
Yeah.
I mean, that same purity culture could develop, on the right, so to speak, or in this space. We
Yeah.
we don't want that.
And what the kind of the point I was driving at is the reason why I think our events are more impactful than the Pangborn ones is we have a wider range of socioeconomic statuses. The IDW kind of pitches to like people that are highly educated, successful, things like that. We have a little bit of that, but we also have a wide range. We have middle class, we have upper middle class. We have somewhere a little below middle. Like we have people that regular people watch, and that's what we think are important, is to get those voices out there. And in a lot of cases these people have their own platforms, like Sargons and the Jack Posobics, Tim Pools and that, but bringing them together to talk, it's like it's
and what you get
really
to do
powerful.
is I love Jordan Peterson, so I don't want to defame him at all. I think he's just the best, but I paid quite a bit for his to go see him in Milwaukee and then do the after party or the after event thing.
Yeah.
And the after event was about 150 people. So the theater seated about 2,000, and then it was just 150 us. We got to move up to the kind of the front 10 rows, and then a few people got to ask questions. Okay, that it was interesting, it was nice, but it probably wasn't worth it. Whereas this event, you have the speakers there, with it, Better Discourse and Minds IRL and all the Mythicons. You have the speakers that are there are throughout the whole time, so the chances that you're going to run into most of them is pretty high.
And they talk to people,
and they will
time,
talk. Right,
listen,
they're not in and out.
They're not hiding backstage. They're not,
And then you'll run into people of different persuasions. The most fun conversations are usually with the progressives, because like, what can I learn from you that I don't know? And they've come there to talk, so they haven't come there to throw mud. They've come there to talk, so you can learn a lot if you want the other point of view. So that's what our event really puts forward.
I was checking out your Instagram just a few weeks ago, and like I had to laugh when you guys put some kind of post out there, like I'm saying, like, we don't usually invite racists to our event, but like we extended an invitation to Robin DiAngelo, who, as you can imagine, is not my favorite person at the moment, and but I imagine that she's definitely a controversial speaker, but I would imagine that she did not accept your invitation. She's been known to turn down any opportunity to debate or discuss her ideas.
Unfortunately, you're right.
That's like our only troll ask ever.
We don't normally troll invite, but
we typically don't troll invite. But I mean, she has just gotten to the point where she is so impactful and so influential that and to your point, she won't show up. Like, we would have paid her fee, we would have paid for all the stuff for her to come,
and would have treated her nicely.
But the only way she thrives is if she doesn't enter in those challenge debates or conversations, because that's how she stays successful. Is she just ignores the trolls and just keeps going and and it's so. But it's unfortunate. We would love to have her if she's listening to this. I'm sure she listens to your guys' podcast. Come on, come. We'd love to have you. Pay your 6,000 fee or whatever it was, and we'll host you.
I know.
We won't do it.
That's the thing. We feel like she's a bit trolling the world right now, and to say that white people, by dint of birth, and she does say this, that as soon as you come out of the womb, you're racist. She says a baby is racist. That's outrageous. So I'm sorry, like, if you're going to go to that level and they're upset about a little bit of trolling, too bad.
and the thing is, the reason she's so problematic at this point, Vincent, you were talking about in academia and the universities, social justice was an issue. She's bringing it to the workplace. She's bringing it to people that know they don't have a choice but to attend these trainings and to sit in a training and have someone call them a racist. And if they get upset, they're just proving her right, that they're actually racist. And in the workplace, you don't have a choice, so that's the most dangerous thing with her trainings, is that corporations.
They're sadistic.
Like,
so one of the first things, there's an excellent podcast on Katie Herzog's podcast, which is Blocked and Reported, where she has a special where she one-on-one interviews a woman that had gone through her training. And one of the first things they say is, when you get up there, if you're white, you are not allowed to push back. So if you are called a racist, don't defend yourself. You are not allowed. In fact, you'll be asked to leave if you are. So if you get accused of racism, guilty or not, you have to take it. And like they had a very poignant example where everyone's staring at this woman for doing something that wasn't racist, but everybody thinks it is because she's not allowed to give it any context.
Yeah.
That's sadistic.
Yeah, I actually had to deal with that in the academic setting. Just last month, I had to take a summer class for philosophy. And if I wanted extra credit, what I had to do was join a reading group, and the book of discussion was White Fragility. I already read that book like months ago. So imagine my excitement when I realized I had to read it again and have a discussion about it.
Did you go?
Yeah, I did.
Talk about it.
Good thing I did, because I would have gotten a B in the class were it not for that extra credit. But here's the thing, that it doesn't concern me that I had to read White Fragility. I think that would be perfectly fine if we were to engage in an honest discussion, whether it be people who agree with it or disagree with it. I'm someone who would be perfectly fine reading Mein Kampf, because I genuinely have that much faith in our species' ability to reason. But my concern came from the fact that the instructions we were given when it came to reading that book was to view our knee-jerk disagreements with the book as not understanding the literature.
Yeah.
Those were the type of instructions that we were to be had. And of course, no surprise, it was me versus the entire class. The entire class loved the book. And my professor talked about things like her being mansplained to. And I did my best to combat this idea that racism is not a structural problem, or sorry, that racism itself shouldn't be defined in a structural way. It should be defined in an interpersonal way, especially if that's the way that the dictionary defines it. And whether you view language as prescriptive or descriptive, most people define it that way. Trying to argue against the entire epistemology, because without going too deep into critical race theory, one of the things that what they say is that the idea of the scientific method, the idea of recognizing evidence as an important aspect of our epistemology, is itself a white supremacist model. And so they go through a completely different route. And so, like, how do you argue with that?
I know.
You brought up a good point about the IDW, that even though they could disagree economically, they could disagree on ideas when it comes to religion, generally speaking, they're all against postmodernism, and they're all against the far left progressive wing, right? But what about those people? What about those people that aren't represented in these types of quote unquote intellectual conversations? And I think that's one of the things that you guys are doing fantastic, right? Because you have people from that wing, right? You have I always mispronounce his name, like Vladimir Nyquist, the guy from Creationist Cat. Like, you have people like him.
Yep.
And so what I often wonder is, the people who are never represented in these conversations are the people who have a completely different epistemology from us, the people who say that it is pointless to debate because the act of debate itself is a white supremacist model, and that we have to think about other ways of thinking, indigenous ways of thinking, POC ways of epistemologies. These people are almost never in the conversation, because using their own rules, using their own logic, it is futile to engage in these conversations. And what's crazy is that they're winning. They've taken over the academy. Originally, I was reading an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal from a theoretical physicist the other day, when he said that when it came to this was always in the humanities. It started in the 1960s with the French philosophers, and it was just sort of always there, but we kind of just made fun of it. But because we never combated it, now it's spread into STEM. You mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that now we're having a conversation about whether 2 + 2 can equal 5. And so what I want to ask you is that, because you're in the business of trying to get as many different sides as possible, what do we do with the people who themselves say that debate itself is violence? You guys got grief for having Peter Coffin on, right? And you were called Nazi and whatever popular derogatory epithet is thrown around. And I've often wondered if this unwillingness to have conversations with people who hold differing opinions from us is rooted in our evolution. So, as Bruce mentioned, given that we evolved in a tribalistic manner and we're so hostile towards anything that either thinks differently or looks differently from us, and at the same time, I also do recognize that many of them are trying to shut down particular conversations because, from a utilitarian perspective, I suppose, the damage done by the speech that they're concerned about is greater than the damage done by not giving people a platform.
Yeah.
So what's your sort of take on how do we get these group of people, the people who are hostile to conversations, especially the people who have completely different epistemologies from us, how do we get them to talk with us, to discuss with us? the Sam Harris quote that I always like is, how do you reason with people who don't even value reason or value evidence?
Mhm. And I do this because the platform word came up. I knew it was going to. I hate that. I really hate that word. Go ahead, Brian. I know you have.
No, my thought was like two things. Well, one, like, how do you reason with that person? Well, you can't in a group. So if you did have that person, the only hope would be a one-on-one, because as soon as that person's part of the group, you could get cast out for knowing it. So I would think your only hope is a one-on-one, and if that doesn't work, then I think you just have to wait. Maybe the Overton window switches, and you can do something a little bit later.
Yeah, and where we've seen success, and I take your point on everything you said, Vincent. Our challenge is always, it's the funniest thing. Is no surprise, I'm sure, conservatives, libertarians, they're like the first ones we book because they love these things. They love coming to these things. They love speaking and engaging in discussion. People on the left, especially the further left, it's much more of a challenge. And the approach that we've taken is, there's some people that are not going to talk to you. Robin DiAngelo, she's not going to talk to you. You know, the people that are in power, they're not going to talk to you. But there is this growing group of people, social media or YouTubers or whatever, that typically tend to be like on the Bernie side. Some of them, I guess I don't want to label them, but there's this growing group of people that on the left that are willing to debate. So the thing is, their names aren't, the IDW, again, you have Sam Harris, you have all these big names. They're smaller names. So what the IDW should do, in my opinion, is start bringing up these smaller names that are on that side that are willing to talk. And that's where I come in with like the IDW. And they're not always willing to talk to certain people. But even though they're smaller and they have a smaller platform, that shouldn't matter. It's the ideas that are being challenged. So for us, our greatest success is finding those people. Brian's really good at finding these people that are like up and coming, or that are just starting, but hold this diversity of viewpoints. And if they're willing to show up, we'll bring them. And you can ask any of them, Vadim, Chris Yassi, any of them. When we have them there, we treat them the same. They're treated exactly the same. We give them the platform. I hate that word. They get to, go on stage and do all that stuff and really argue their points.
And what was cool is that to some of them, to their own surprise, their own fans were there.
Yeah.
They thought, oh God, I'm coming into the lion's den. This is gonna, I'm gonna tough it out, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
But like, they didn't have to necessarily do that as much when you had their own fans that were excited to see them. I think that helps a lot. But, so we're getting a diverse enough. Are we perfectly, the perfect bell curve? No, but we're close.
Yeah. And the challenge is getting the people in academia, like your professor, the lefty professors, they won't come. We spent a collective of like 80 hours emailing different.
We emailed so many gender studies professors.
So, so many.
And and then when we got one back who said, "This sounds really interesting. I would really love to do it. I really want to do it, but I've got a wedding on the day that you're doing the thing, and I can't."
Yeah. So that is the challenge, is getting those voices, but they're there. You just have to, understand that the ones in power are most likely not.
And the other thing you have to do is build the trust. So if we, appear or not, like if you are perceived to be right wing, then it's going to take a little longer to earn the trust of the people on the other side. So that's what we've got to do. We can't just expect that to come through. We're going to try to earn that by treating the left leading speakers and attendees when they come here well. And then you build that slowly, but we don't demand it immediately. I get why they might look at us skeptically, but you just have to kind of fight through it and try to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my philosophy is very similar as yours. The idea that pretty much willing to have a conversation with just about anybody. The conversation shifts when people say something along the lines of, well, you have a platform. Is it responsible to be hosting a person with a particular view of viewpoints? And the certain pandemic that I can't name because otherwise YouTube will kill this video, really brought to light this idea where there were so many people on Twitter spreading misinformation that genuinely had the potential to kill people if people took this information as gospel. And so then this opens up the conversation is, sure, the idea that we should have a marketplace of ideas and have conversations with just about anybody overall increases the well-being of a society because it allows us to analyze our own particular viewpoints and solidify our claims by understanding the opposition's claims better. But is this good overwhelmed by the negative side, by the bad that comes across when people are spreading misinformation and so many people take it seriously to the point where they're being killed? So, are there any instances in which you guys recognize the harm in platforming someone? Yeah, I know you don't like the word, but
Yeah.
in holding someone and spreading their views so much so to the point where it is possible that the damage done is greater than the good?
Yeah.
I suppose there's a line, right? That where is the line? This is a wholly subjective thing. So our primary credo is to keep the viewpoint diversity wide enough to where it covers the vast majority of people. There is a fringe out there, on the fringes that you probably don't want to do, but it's very important to keep it as open as possible.
Yeah. And what I would say with that, that platform argument, the reason why I hate that word is it's always thrown at us. We have to keep in mind the people that are coming to these events have their own platform. Tim Pool has a giant platform. Carl has a giant platform. All these people that we bring have giant platforms already, So we're not doing anything besides putting them on a stage in front of way less people than they talk to every day online anyways. So yeah. So do I think that there's any danger in what we're doing? No. What we're doing is if you don't, this gives you an opportunity. If someone that doesn't agree with said person, they can come and challenge that person. Say, hey, I don't agree with you on this, and they will gladly answer that question or answer that challenge. I mean, that's the beauty of what we do. Is if you agree with Lauren Chen, you can't stand one of her points or whatever, come to the event, she'll talk about it, she'll showcase her point of view. And I think that's, so it's much more challenging for the people that come because they know they have to back up their arguments. And so I think, I that's why I just hate that word platform, because you could choose just to stay on your own.
That's true, right?
Your own platform, Twitter, YouTube, whatever, and just ignore everyone else and just keep talking.
It's hard to say. I think the most viral of the most watched video is the MythCon 4 Sargon versus Thomas Smith, right? Of all the things,
which it wasn't supposed to be a versus.
Okay, but it's that discussion. It became a versus, but that got a ton of views. But still, Sargon has many more millions of views than that one particular got. And at the same time, we're also putting out Thomas Smith's progressive message along with that, because if you're watching that, you're seeing two people. So
and I think
you're getting out one, you're getting out the other.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to have a conversation about conversations without talking about what is the catalyzing enzyme of, as you guys said, dunking on people, which is Twitter. I view Twitter basically as effectively a failed social experiment, where originally speaking, you can view its conception as a way for people to bring about conversations or at least just keep in touch with old family members. But what it's really become is just this platform where conversations really go to die, reputations go to die. People, and what I often say is that I don't even think Twitter is even a necessary tool at this point, because studies have come out and show that Twitter is not representative of anything. Originally, I was on Twitter just because I wanted to get a general idea of what the conversation milieu is, right? What are people thinking generally about this topic? What is, what in what direction is this leaning towards? But studies have come out that, not even taking into consideration the 2016 election, in which if you read Twitter, you would have thought that Clinton would have won by a landslide. But Twitter itself, most people on Twitter, when polls come out, show that people, generally speaking, are center left. But it's never the center left tweets that get 100,000 likes. It's always far left tweets that get 100,000 likes. And so Twitter's not even representative of Twitter. So is Twitter even necessary at this point? Or do you think that it's done so much damage to the conversation? And this is often why I'm a bit skeptical when new platforms come in, like Gab, or and they say, like, Twitter's become a far left cesspool, come join us. But I mean, isn't that just invitation for the far right cesspool to go and join you? Isn't that just going to create another echo chamber? What are your what are your thoughts on Twitter? Has it done much harm, or do you disagree with me and say that it's actually been good?
Yeah, so for Twitter, like the two things that I think are bad about it are, one, there's mobs. There's Twitter mobs that are come through, and two, it's taken seriously. Like, Twitter determines what's on the news. So we take Twitter serious in a way that we didn't take the internet seriously prior to 2007 or so. So those are the bad things. The upside is, like, it really does showcase the diversity of viewpoint. Like, there's the people that say, oh, liberals and blah, blah, blah. Well, you really get a sense of liberals, progressives, people in between. Like, I didn't know what a tanky was until I came on Twitter, and you see, holy cow, like, wow, even AOC looks like an angel compared to a tanky. So you get to see a lot. And if you try on Twitter, if you really try, you can find people of good faith on the other side that can talk to you. And I've found that. Again, there's going to be people that are going to shit on you and that don't want to be honest, that just want to troll. You can just mute them, block them, whatever you want to do. But you can do it. I think if people use Twitter and they really tried, it's actually not bad.
Yeah, and I don't have such a positive take as Brian does. I agree with you, Vincent. I think Twitter has outlived its usefulness. Unfortunately, it's a machine that isn't going away. It's only getting stronger. And I agree with you that it doesn't represent the majority of people in the world, especially like in America, it doesn't. But unfortunately, what it does is it spins these narratives that the journalists who are on Twitter use, and then that's what they're turning into news. I mean, Tim Pool has done a good job with this over the years, showcasing just like how the journalists get special treatment on Twitter, how there's only one, there's a specific narrative that gets boosted. And this is where, even though it's not necessarily representing the majority of people in the world, this is where the influential people go to get the narratives that take that narrative to the rest of the world.
But this fits into my theory, because those journalists that are putting out clickbait, outrage that they know is going to sell and is hyperbolic, are fitting into the not trying category. They're not trying to be honest. Those people are trying to sell. So one of the other downsides is Twitter is it polarizes. It's easy to think, oh my God, look at those people over there. You also feel like you've got a team of the people that like you, and the people that are in your camp and then following. So you get a camp, you get some friendly with Twitter, but it really can other the other side. And you have to remember that that's not real.
But it's an emotional, stress on people such as yourself, us, anyone that's trying to operate in the public sphere, anyone that's a public personality, anyone that's trying to sell anything, anyone that's trying to get their word out and their mission. And they need it today. And unfortunately, it's become so toxic that it gives people like panic attacks, like I hate it. I hate doing it. And like when Twitter first came out, we joined it like when it first started, just like Facebook.
I didn't know how to use it.
We're that old, yeah. He didn't know. We joined. We were on MySpace too back in the day, but it was never to the point where if you put up a Facebook post, you're like, is this going to ruin my life? Or if you put up a MySpace post, you're like, am I going to lose my job tomorrow? Now it's gotten to this point where it's like anything you put up, you still need it. Unfortunately, you need it because you have to get your message out. But it can also destroy you at the same time. So it's like, it's this terrible dichotomy. It's this awful,
right?
Awful
it's almost, it's like, somebody at a Borgia wine tasting, right? And you're like, oh man, does this stuff have the poison in it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you two think about that new platform? Well, I don't know how new it is now, but like there was something that the creators of Aerial Magazine created called Letter.wiki. It allows for as YouTube has allowed for long form conversations between people. Letter.wiki allows for long form written conversations where people cannot dunk on you. People can observe the conversation. They can't like it. They can't dislike it. I've come across some really, really interesting conversations on there. Like one of the most prominent ones was by two people I really respect, Ali Rizvi and Matt Thornton, in which they were discussing. They had very, very different takes on Black Lives Matter, but it wasn't from a very, very broad stroke perspective. They both brought a lot of nuance and a lot of collective data to that conversation that took place over a very, very long a conversation that gave each side a chance to reflect, absorb, and to respond in that fashion. That seems to be a much healthier way to encourage conversation. But with Twitter, it allows you to shitpost. It allows you to throw something out there that's just meant to inflame, to piss people off, and that's why it's so popular. What about platforms like Letter? And do you think
I
these
didn't know about that one.
Yeah,
That sounds
I
cool.
didn't know about that one, but you guys are too young. But like when YouTube first came out, maybe you were alive. I don't know. How long has it been out?
Jesus
I don't know.
Christ.
You guys are really young, right? But when it first came out, it was that platform. It was you created a video, someone else created a video to respond to your video, then you created another video to respond to that. So it took time, it took effort. Like I was just like, I didn't use it that way, but that's like how like the early people in YouTube, like that's how the platform actually grew, is exactly how you're describing it, like having these long form discussions and then like responding to, having time, then having people respond to it. And I think that's a good, I mean, I think it's a pro. That's why YouTube got so big, you know, and then cat videos and all that other stuff got famous for them. And but you know, like, yeah, I think
but
it's
the like
good.
button is a big deal. Like, you know, the
I think
Twitter
it's
comes
good.
out with the like, so then Facebook does the retweet, and then the Facebook came out with the share.
Yeah.
Like that does make it different. As soon as you put this with an audience, it's a completely different game.
Yeah.
You know, like when you know, and I think you'll be more honest with somebody without an audience than you will with, because now you have to worry about what that audience thinks.
Yeah.
I think to the extent that you care about that, you're not going to be honest.
To your point, though, I think it sounds like a good platform. We have to check it out. But here's the issue right now: is all of a sudden we're seeing all these platforms that are coming out, and it's hard. It's hard to compete with YouTube because they give you the inherent monetization, or at least they used to, for views. So you don't even have to do anything, and you can make money, right? As long as people are watching your videos. So that no one's going to be able to compete with YouTube until someone has enough capital to come out and pay their creators. That's what will challenge YouTube. Twitter is just gotten so big that, you know, all the influential people are on there. It's going to take someone like a Donald Trump to leave Twitter and choose a different platform, and then force people, because, you know, all the journalists, everyone else is going to go and follow whatever that social media site is. That's the only way anyone's going to be able to compete with Twitter at this point, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask you too about the kind of effect that discourse on these topics actually have in the mainstream society. Like a while back, there was an author by the name of Dieter Hofstadter, and there were a number of people who followed in behind, talking about there being a rise of anti-intellectualism in the United States. And right now, again in 2020, we have two political extremes, and they all have very, very, very different takes on a variety of issues. And anyone on the opposite end tosses it aside if they find out that whatever you're discussing is actually the viewpoint of the other side. So as a result, you get respected right-wing intellectuals like Thomas Sowell bring up criticisms of social and welfare policies who get slammed by the left. And then, of course, there's this rampant climate change denial on the right. Now, everyone, quote unquote, claims to respect critical thinking and science, but I think now everyone knows that that respect goes out the window as soon as someone says something contrary to their narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have these events, thanks to you and other people out there who are promoting this conversation, promoting dialogue. But I have to ask, like, does this do anything to really get to combat anti-intellectualism itself? Because people throw around that term critical thinking. No one can define what it is, and I generally think of it as science broadly construed. But there's a disdain for philosophy. There's a disdain for critical thinking, and there's just this tendency just to cherry pick evidence to support a viewpoint. Now, these dialogues are good, and they probably shift perspective. But when it comes down to it, we, in order to participate in democracy, you have to have an epistemology that's not reliant on narrative. You have to be able to look at facts and data objectively to come to an objective viewpoint. And we don't seem to have that. So, what effect does discourse have at getting us back to first principles?
Well, see, narrative is it can suck, right? Because narrative isn't following like it doesn't follow objective truth necessarily. It could, but often it doesn't. But it's more effective. It's more effective than going through and proving your point. So almost everyone uses it. So it's really easy to let a narrative go that's pointing in the same direction as you. So you don't want to criticize that narrative, because even though you don't like it, it's still useful. And I think both sides is playing with this, is that you're automatically, if someone's pointing the same direction as you, even if they're a radical, sometimes you'll let it go because at least they're pointing the same direction. And your fear of the other side, that the other side is an existential threat, that the tyranny of the majority will be so bad if they win, we mustn't. So that absolutely is anti-intellectual, usually to your own side. So you won't critique your own side's arguments, but you will absolutely go after their conspiracy theories. In fact, you most likely take their conspiracy theories and promote them as that's what the mainstream on the opposite side looks like. And both sides do that all the time.
Yeah, it's that's a very interesting question. I think a lot of people, I think the majority of people, they live their life, they have their families, they go to their jobs. They don't necessarily want to be watching 4-hour debates. They don't want to, read giant books. They don't, they want things that are easy. I was in this world, like you go to work, you don't want to watch all these things. And do you mind being challenged? No, not necessarily, but you also don't want to put all the time and effort in it because you have all this real life stuff that you're worried about, and so I think like what the narratives do, and you guys were mentioning the slogans before, what they do is they simplify these ideas, like, and Trump's really good at this. They take these complex things and they simplify it down to where like the common person can just say, okay, I can repeat that. Is that good? I don't know. It's effective. I mean, if you run any focus group or, if you've been a part of focus groups or anything like that, you'll see how effective it is. Is it good? Probably not, because we should be challenging people to think more critically and to take it a step further. So that's what we try to do.
To open up the critical window,
right?
Like you have to first get over an abject fear of the other side.
Yeah.
Because you will not let your mind go to that place if you think, oh my God, that's over here. Otherwise, you're probably just a bad person or a traitor. But so half the point of this is seeing these people and seeing, wow, this person has a really disparate view, but they're an all right person. Yeah. In fact, I kind of like them. Yeah. That now you might be a little more open, but you have to get over the fear before you're going to seriously consider those arguments.
But you have the point I'm making is you have to make it fun for people. You have to make them seek it out. So someone like Joe Rogan has perfected this. Joe Rogan has very, very difficult conversations, but he does it in a way to where people, the normal viewer, someone like myself, can watch it and say, oh my God, I didn't know that. I find this interesting. And he delivers it in a way where it's like Joe Everyman. Like you're going to understand what Joe asked really good questions for two reasons. A, they're well researched. He does research. But B, the common person can understand it, and that's why I think he's doing really well. And someone like him needs to be promoted because he's challenging really tough topics, and he's allowing various diversity of viewpoints. It's not just one. He's got people on there talking about ancient aliens. Like he's got all of these things, but he's able to do it and make it fun and relatable to people. And I think those are the best ways forward. It's like combination.
But still, there's a whole host of people that think Joe Rogan is evil.
Yeah.
And that think that he's doing something really, really bad. Yeah. And they're actually fearful of his success. So that person, like, the only way that they would consider some of these arguments is at first they met some Joe Rogan fans that are passionate about him, and they actually got on and they liked each other. Then they maybe start to question, okay, well, they're okay people. Maybe Joe Rogan isn't leading to fascism. And then if that fear goes away, you might be able to consider. But as long as that wall's up, There's no chance.
Well, I've spoken to people before who I'm a big Joe Rogan fan myself, and I grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley, so and I still consider myself a liberal. But and when I have these conversations with people from my hometown, I've literally had someone tell me off the bat that he thinks Joe Rogan is right wing. But when you asked him about his positions, like what you asked him to name out 5 positions that he's quote unquote right wing on, he gave me a blank look.
Right.
Joe is actually left. So, again, we're seeing a shift in and how narrative shifts perspective. But what's fascinating about Joe is, and he does this so effectively, just by being a good conversationalist, he makes the dialogue a lot of fun to listen to. But
Yeah.
because the quality of the questions he asks, he pushes back so successfully against people who make a lot of disingenuous statements. Like, if I compare him to someone like Dave Rubin, who is just awful at doing this, like, Joe just asks questions in a non-antagonistic fashion,
Yeah.
and the person just falls apart on the podcast. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
But and again, what Joe does, and I actually had the honor of being in Joe's studio, his last studio, not his new one. But yeah, I was there with like Jamie and him and all that, and it was a really cool experience. But what Joe does is he reads, he brings a guest on, he reads their book. If he brings a guest on, he does his research. Like, he's very, like, I can't imagine how many books he reads a week. The guy's nuts, but like, he really does, like, he comes prepared to these interviews. But
Right.
again, he has that ability to break it down so I can understand what the question is. Like, if I hear Eric Weinstein and Sam Harris having discussions, sometimes I get lost on some of the stuff they're saying, like, because it's not down to the level of like being able to like soak this stuff in, and that's what Joe's brilliant. I mean, he smokes weed on the show, like he's and he makes.
I mean, he's a legend
and,
for getting Elon Musk high.
Exactly.
I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Can we just say that?
So we just passed up the hour, so I guess this is a good place to end it. I don't want to take too much of your guys' time, but I want to thank you guys endlessly for coming on the podcast.
I
This has
one
been
like quick question to like throw at you. Like, what this has been bugging me. As soon as you meant up that like the whole idea that the postmodern, we need to consider other ideas that are outside of science, right?
Mhm.
And in other ways of knowing, right? Yet Stella Emanuel, Dr. Stella Emanuel, one of the America's frontline doctors, who is off narrative, they get censored, right? And she's saying XYZ about hydroxychloroquine being effective in her practice, but then she believes in some weird stuff like demon sperm, which clearly has some African animism in there. I thought we were supposed to respect different ways of knowing. I wonder where they are on this. I wonder if you asked one of those people, like the true, there is no objective truthers, could they wrap around and be Stella Emanuel fans?
It's difficult to say, because one of the things that a lot of these people often say actually is that the concept itself of a contradiction in thought is white supremacist. So they love the idea of personal experiences, right? This is one of the problems that I have and one of the like criticisms that I have of them is that when your epistemology is almost indistinguishable from religion, there's a problem. And so when they say something like personal experience is paramount in these sorts of conversations, especially when it comes to oppression, right? So in the conversation of oppressor versus oppressed, they say that the oppressed person has the more valid approach to reality because they can see structures that the oppressor cannot. But when you have two people who have conflicting ideas of what a framework of reality is, whether this, let's just say for the sake of the example, one is a Muslim and one is a Christian. These are two people who, what a sin in one religion is a vindication in the other. So these are just logically inconsistent, right? It doesn't fit the philosophical syllogism. What they will say is that it's not a contradiction. And the idea that you're claiming it's a contradiction is a byproduct of you being raised in a white supremacist epistemology. This sounds crazy. And I will tell people that this is what they believe, and they'll say, no one actually believes that, you're straw manning them. This is in their literature. This is what the architects of theory believed. And this is why I respect people like James Lindsay so much that are attacking this at its roots, because even though your average woke person doesn't know anything about Foucault, they don't know anything about Lyotard, they don't know anything about applied postmodernism, a lot of their ideas come from there. It comes from a flawed epistemology. And so that's why I respect people like James Lindsay so much. And so to answer your question, I have no idea. It's so
Oh,
hard. Like they
but
come up.
that whole point, you just outflanked me from the left there. That's impressive. Yeah, the fact that I have a problem with the contradiction is in fact white supremacy. So shut
Yeah.
up. I mean, yeah, you solved it. I was like, damn, I didn't see that one coming up.
That's funny.
So well done. You snuck around the flank.
Well, the whole thing's like as you said on your other podcast, the whole thing is a religion / ideology. If you see objective truth and it doesn't vibe with whatever narrative that has made your thought process so rigid, you try to mold it to fit whatever you think to whatever view you have of the world, and not the other way around. It's like theory, critical race theory, just twists the minds of progressives into knots.
I know this is like in Mario Kart when you get the star or something, right? You're just invincible. It's God mode, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing that can stop you.
Yeah.
They have faith.
I have a guilty pleasure. I'll end it off here. I have a guilty pleasure of just buying every single critical race theory book I can find. So Target and Barnes and Noble now has like an end cap for a bunch of anti-racism books, and I literally bought like every book there. I bought Me and White Supremacy by Layla Sad. I bought this other book. It's like How to Be Black in a like white society or something like that, and it's like heroin. I love this.
Oh my
But
God!
what-
Do you do Ibram
but-
Kendi's too?
Oh no, I haven't yet. It's on my Amazon cart.
But what you just said was very telling. Target has an anti-racist area, right? That's what you just
Oh,
said.
Barnes and Noble.
Or
Target sells these books too, but they don't have like a specific end cap for it.
And that again, why D'Angelo is so dangerous in the corporate, because corporate at the end of the day cares about the bottom line. They don't care about making statements for the most part. They'll make the BLM statements when they have to, so the mob passes over them. But for the most part, they care about the bottom line, and they're going to sell whatever's trending, and the workers are just going to have to go along with it. I mean, it's just like they're so transparent. So that I just thought it's funny.
Wow. But even taking the word anti-racist, what bums me out is they've kind of got the monopoly on those words. Things like anti-racist.
Mhm.
That when someone hears that, they think about, okay,
great.
well, the opposite of what George
I'm
Wallace
anti-racist.
was, right? They don't think of what it actually means,
Yeah.
and that really clouds things up and is a problem.
I tried convincing Armin Avabi, the founder of Atheist Republic, where I tried to make the case that it is, even though I don't want to engage in the escape to the future fallacy, where I'm very pessimistic with the future. And what I often say is that they have the upper hand in this conversation, because a surface level analysis of all of these topics always leads in their direction. So as you said, when someone sees anti-racism, they think, well, of course I'm anti-racist, right?
Yep.
Of course I support Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Like these are obviously true things that we want to be a part of. But it's when you start digging into the rabbit hole of anti-racism that, because they want to be anti-racist, they don't question things like statements like, it's not a matter of whether or not racism occurred. It's a matter of whether or not of how racism manifested itself. And they'll just adopt it. We're like, okay, I guess that's what it takes to be anti-racist.
Yep.
So it's really hard to tackle these issues when it's like,
Yeah, and normal people, again, don't have the capacity in a lot of cases in their life to dig down the rabbit hole. It's a luxury for people that have time on their hands, that don't have kids screaming at them. And it's even worse when you have, when it makes it into your company and they say, look, if you say anything against this, you're going to lose your job or promotion or whatever. I mean, it's even worse, because now they've just, there's stranglehold on people. So yeah, it's very, very dangerous.
Well, their narrative become heuristic in that regard. It's the fast track to what they want to believe according to their line of thought.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's just this idea of repressive tolerance throughout.
Yeah.
And that
yes.
You really have to get there. That you need fear of the other side.
Yeah.
It's significant fear in order to get that repressive tolerance started.
And when I say dangerous, I don't like using the term dangerous when it comes to speech, but this isn't speech. This is, listen, you don't get to talk. We're telling you. This is completely different. This is authoritarian.
Yeah.
If there's a discussion, if D'Angelo comes in and says, look, I want you to challenge me on this stuff, I welcome your feedback, that's completely different.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
No. You got to play. You have to play by their rules, or you are a racist, right?
Right.
That whole Kafka trap, where if I accuse a white person of racism and he says they're not racist, that's just evidence of their racism.
Yeah. I know. I think a lot of people I think we're all overly feared. We're too afraid. And I think, people have to stand up and say, guess what? I deserve space to hold my own opinion, and you can't shame me for it. If you can just take that step, anywhere, and I would encourage people to do that at work and other things, to say, hey, I'm allowed to have my own opinion, whether it's right or it's wrong. You have to give me space in which to at least hold it.
As long as I'm not
like
harming
that's
people,
right. Before you can even discuss, you have to agree that it's okay. And people that don't, that's a reasonable statement that almost everyone should agree with. And those that are against something like that should pop out. And I think that's the problem. Most of this is passing because people are like, well, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
And again, I just want to thank you guys for having us on. Are we still recording?
Yeah, we're still recording.
Okay, cool. So I just want to make sure we got the plug out on the events. It's happening this Sunday, August 16th in Milwaukee. And the nice thing is there's 2 other events. So initially when the DNC chose Milwaukee, it was a big thing. They promised 50,000 people to the conference. They promised 1,500 other events surrounding the DNC to take place in Milwaukee. The city pitched in. That's up to like $40 million. The businesses pitched in, a bunch of people. The DNC has not fulfilled that promise, and none of the speakers are coming to the DNC anymore. There are no other events happening. So Milwaukee is kind of, screwed in this scenario. And I get it, with the pandemic and stuff, but I mean, there was no attempt to really fulfill their promise. So we're holding our event on the 16th, which is the day before the DNC was supposed to take place. And there's 2 other events. The Brandon Strock's walkaway demonstration is going to be taking place here
Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday in Milwaukee near Cathedral Square. So if you're in the area, it's near Cathedral Park downtown. And CPAC is hosting an event in Green Bay on the Friday, the 14th. So check that out too. So there's still, those are the only 3 events. Unfortunately, none of them were hosted by the DNC. But so check that out. We got a huge list of speakers. A ton of people are going to be there. It's going to be really, really exciting.
Awesome. Okay. I'll promote all of that in the intro to this video, since most people click off before the video. So all of that will be in the intro, no worries. But once more, thanks for coming on. Keep doing what you guys doing. Check out their podcast. They have gems on there, like Melissa Chen talking about China, Lucas Lynch talking about the political landscape. Like these are amazing people that they managed to get on the podcast. So go check them out.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.